Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. Lukey,
Hey,
what's up,
Luke
dude?
Simons.
Like diamonds.
Ready to
Talking
talk
about,
fishing.
yeah, we're talking about being held hostage to live bait. And we know the feeling because we were held hostage to live bait for many, many, many years. Right, Luke? And remember when we first started,
Yeah.
I think because at the time in Florida, and Texas has always been a little bit different. They've always been a little bit more into lures, right? Just from what I've seen, and even when I live there, they don't. Texas is not the best place if you're selling cast nets. Let's just say that Florida is. But in Florida, at least at the time when we were transitioning over from bass fishermen to inshore saltwater fishermen, everything out there from the fishing magazines and the Florida Sportsman's and the TV shows for the most part were all talking about live bait. And anytime you went out of the water, right, is a newbie, you're seeing everyone else throwing their nets out there and everyone's in the bait spots, right? Getting bait before you'd ever go out. And so we just assumed that was the only way to do it. And you talk about some of that, some of your memories,
Yeah.
because you were probably in a little bit deeper than I was in terms of, you just fished more often and threw the net way more often. I was smart enough to know, hey man, I just got to find a good partner who loves throwing the net. Or
Yeah, you're smart enough to let the little brother lug the cast net around. Yeah, so I was that guy. I was the guy that was I would not go fishing in salt water unless I had the cast net, and not just one cast net, right? I had the 6 footer, then I got an 8, and then I got a 12. And like my lower back still has issues because I was throwing the 12-foot net. I got it when I was 15. And I weighed like a buck 40, and I was 6 foot tall. I had no business lugging around a 12-foot net. And yeah, it was I just thought I had to do it. And I just thought that was part of it. So like I just challenged myself to learn how to throw the biggest net possible so I can catch bait faster. So then I can go fishing. And I was one of the guys that was, I'm sure you've seen the lineup and a lot of the popular bait spots around sunrise. And I still see it all the time. So I know there's a lot of people who are I call it the rut, because nobody likes throwing a cast net. Nobody likes lugging it around. Nobody likes having to clean the boat afterwards or plucking the bait out if you get Christmas treed when your mesh is too big for the bait that's down there. It's not fun. And when the catfish get in the chum slick, now you're dealing with catfish in there, needlefish. It's a hassle. But a lot of us think that it's a requirement, to me it was so I struggled with this so bad that I would spend an hour and a half to catch bait if I had to. Like
mm,
if my first bait spot was bad, I'm starting to get real nervous. Now I'm going to the second one, and now if that one's something good. Okay, now I got to go to the third one, and I literally wouldn't. Although I had lures, I rarely used them, and I would like I was almost like a fair weather lure guy where if the bite was crazy good, or if I just wanted to catch trout like drifting flats, then I'd use lures. But for redfish and snook, I was just under the impression that I had to have live bait. If I didn't have like the best bait, I wasn't gonna catch many fish. And now I'm kicking myself now that I've finally got out of that rut. But it's real. It's real. I'm sure probably a lot of listeners are feeling the same thing. Where just if the bait's not there, is there confidence that you're going to go out and catch a slam? And if the answer is that you don't have the confidence to catch a slam without live bait, then you're in the rut. And I feel your pain because my lower back still feels it 10 years later.
get out of that rut. I remember one time, I don't remember if we were staying at Little Gasparilla Island or at the condo in Placida, but we'd gotten down there, boats ready, getting all the gear ready, and we're about to go out and realized and this is early morning, right? Realized that we didn't have any chum. And I,
Mm.
I remember I got sent to go all the way to Publix, so it's not the end of the world, but so now you're already missing the best bite, right? The best time of day is in the morning in general, like in the summertime where we were. So now, why they're waiting on me, and we still can't even go out to get the bait to go fishing. I'm having to go to Publix, and we got cat food, right? Remember that was what we used, little cat food. Then we use the cat food to chum up, the live bait, right? Either white bait, pinfish, whatever it was, and we're using now cat food to do that. And the whole thing was just looking back. I was like, man, what an absolute, knowing what we know now, what an absolute waste of time. And that whole thing was probably an hour and a half ordeal before we ever got enough bait in the boat to even go fishing. And now we've missed what I would say is probably the best hour and a half of fishing because we were just dorking around trying to get live bait. So frustrating. And
Yeah,
you
we
had
didn't
a
even think twice. We didn't
no,
think twice
yeah,
about
it's
it
just
either.
yeah, it's just what you do.
Gotta do it.
We wouldn't even considered, hey, maybe we should just go try it with lures. That was like, well, that's weird. That'll never work. You had an instance because now you spent a lot of time at Little Gasparilla Island. You had an instance recently where you went out fishing, did well, and were watching. You were right near one of the popular bait spots and just watching all those people out there for an hour plus, I think is what you told me, just throwing nets one after another and more boats coming in, all while missing one of the best parts of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I was down there. It was just a few weeks ago, and now like I rarely fish more than 3 hours because it's really not needed. If especially if you can get out early in the morning. Again, just kicking myself now for so many years, we would be out catching bait while the sun was rising. It's the easiest time to catch bait. It's also by far the easiest time to catch the snook, the reds, the trout, the actual target species. And if you skip the bait and just take lures to good spots, now in many cases I'll go out and catch a slam with in early morning, like while the sun's coming up, and then kind of that's just what I like to do. And once I catch a slam, okay, I'm done. Like I don't need to stay out here much longer, especially when it starts getting hot. It's just like why make it tough to go hang out on the beach and relax. But countless times where I'm done catching the slam, coming back at whatever 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, whatever time it is, and there's just boats lined up, right? And the same bait spots we used to go to. Like I was down in Placida, so out there, out in front of the trestle on the way to like Devilfish Key, like down toward Boca Grande.
Yep.
There's grass flats there. There's a lot of current flow. There's just nice, healthy grass on both sides of the channel. It's just a great place to catch bait. But again, there's like 8 boats posted up. And they could have easily just skipped that whole step and just taken a handful of lures. You don't have to get much, like less is more, actually. Skip that whole process and just go fish and not deal with all the extra hassle of lugging the cast net, cleaning up the boat. I remember how many, I don't know, I'd hate to even put a number to it, but how many extra hours of boat cleaning was I did over the years, just because all that little, especially when those little glass minnows come in, they get in every little hatch. There's just stuff everywhere, plus all the seagrass and just mud. So I don't know. Like again, the more I look back on it, the more painful those years were. But as we said, like it wasn't even a thought that was an issue at the time, because that was just what we thought we had to do. And it's just like, again, kind of kicking ourselves too. Like we were good bass fishermen. We grew up on a lake in Central Florida, did a ton of bass fishing. We were very successful, not doing tournaments, but just going out and just having fun, and rarely ever use lures. And
No,
so
live
we were
bait.
good with, yeah, or sorry, rarely ever use live bait. All we use was lures. And for whatever reason, we just didn't translate that to saltwater. We just thought saltwater was different. And if anything, like now I personally feel that saltwater fish are way more aggressive than bass. So like if you can catch a bass with a lure, you absolutely can catch a snook in reds and especially trout with lures consistently, because they're more aggressive. You just have to know where they hold, like where they position. We struggled. Again, redfish was my toughest one, and I was just simply fishing too deep. Once I fixed that issue, then okay, redfish really aren't that hard to catch at all, even on top water. It's a ton of fun.
Yeah, yeah. And Kent Hickman was on the show a couple weeks ago. And if you don't know Kent, guys fished a ton of tournaments. Ended up becoming the main director of the Power Pole Redfish series, which is, I believe, the biggest one out there for redfish tournaments. And I love what he said. He's like, if you're looking for redfish in more than 3 feet of water, then you're in the wrong spot. He's like, I don't even look. I won't even waste my time there. He's like, I know they can be underneath docks. I asked him about like docks. He's like, honestly, I rarely, unless it's a real particular area where I know there's some oysters and the docks are like the best spot, then maybe. But he's like, it's so rare. And he goes, we do tournaments from Texas, Louisiana, the Carolinas, Florida, and more often than not, like 90% of the time, it's in less than 3 feet of water. And I'm looking for mullet. I'm looking for ledges. I'm looking for oysters, any type of structure that's going to give these redfish an opportunity to, one, hide, and two, find some dinner. So let's talk about that now. We've really hammered home the problem here that hey, it's it is being held hostage if that's the only way you feel comfortable and confident to catch fish. What would you tell someone who was in our shoes? What do you wish someone had told you besides, hey, try lures? Okay, cool, I get that. What type of lures? How do we simplify it to make it fun still, comfortable and confident for someone who has relied on a live well blacked out with live bait to go out there and consistently catch fish with lures
Step one is to realize there's a problem, right? Just like anything, right?
and go to a
'Cause-
meeting. Hi,
yeah,
my name is Bob.
because what a lot of people do, okay, they're comfortable with live bait. Like assume they have live bait. Okay, I'm comfortable now. I can catch some fish, and I'll start dilly down with lures, right? I'll start kind of doing the same thing I do with live bait, and then start throwing lures in the mix, and that's almost guaranteed to fail. If you're using lures
Yes.
properly, like if you have some like even an expert with lures and expert with live bait in the same boat, one of them's going to struggle, right? It all depends on what type of fishing you're doing. They're two different styles. If you're just fishing from a pier, like for anybody just fishing from piers where you can't move around, live bait's hard to beat. Live bait's going to win. The benefit of lures is that for those of us who aren't on the water all day, which is most of us, and we don't know exactly where the fish are, we're better off moving around to find what we will call the 90-10 zone, which is the principle, which is true that at any given time, 90% of the feeding fish are in just 10% of the water, right? So if you think about just whatever area body, whatever body of water you fish at any given time, 90% of that water is not going to have many fish at all. And you might as well not be there. And so if you don't, and obviously it moves around. It moves around based on tide, based on weather patterns. And so if you don't know exactly where the fish are and you go to a bad spot and sit there with live bait, you could have the best live bait ever and you're going to catch anything. But if you have just some lures that work, just a handful of lures that work, I rarely use more than like 2 or 3 lures in a given trip. If you have lures that work that you trust, and then you can move around and start finding looking for the feed, like egrets are my favorite thing, and jumping mullet as well. This time of the year in particular, if you have those two, that's almost guaranteed to be redfish. You know there's bait there. The redfish love feeding on the same thing egrets do. Egrets are white. You can see them from a long distance off, especially if they're like on a backdrop of mangroves or sawgrass. They stand out like sore thumbs. But anyhow, yeah, just get the confidence to go out there and just make it happen. And I was for me again for just so long we had like 6 spots because we were live bait guys. We would go to those 6 spots and then we would try with lures and we just sit there and struggle. And the reality is that the lures are better for weekend warriors simply because you can cover water while still getting strikes. That's it. Lures, it's a numbers game. It's all about the numbers game, and you can cover way more water, which is going to increase the odds that you find multiple 90-10 spots in a 1 or 2 hour span. That alone is going to more than offset the fact that live bait. If you see one fish and you have a live shrimp or a fake shrimp, like which one to throw at it? The live shrimp, of course. But if you don't know where those fish are, then you're better off covering every single inch of a football field than like one little corner of the end zone. So that's really it's just all comes down to a numbers game.
I like it. I'll tell you one thing that will guarantee will never work for lures. So we have a guy on our team. I won't name his name. We'll just call him Mark. Wink, wink. So he's a live bait guy, always has been. And when he joined the team, we were asking him, like, "Hey man, you've never had luck with lures?" And he's like, I've tried. All right, tell me more. Like, what happened? He's like, "Well, I took some lures out." And like, and then what? And he's like, "Oh, after making a few casts, I didn't catch anything, so I went back to live bait." So here's where I'm going with this. If you go out with a full live well of live bait and lures, and a second you don't see a lure work, you just go back to live bait, it will fail. And you're good about this, even like on tournaments. Your gut instinct would say, hey, maybe I'll have some live bait just in case. And the second you do that, you're guaranteeing you're never going to get good with the lures. And so the recommendation here, instead of doing that, basically you have a foot on both sides, right? Instead of doing that, you need to go all in. And you, like Pat talked about on the last podcast, we had Pat on there where he says, you know what, I'm just going to get good at one. I'm going to take nothing else but topwater lures. I'm just going to get great at one lure. and I'm never going to try anything else. And he's like, that was the best thing I ever did. And so that's what I would say, because like this guy Mark, and he's now seen, we've taken him out in the boat, and he's just like, we don't have. He gets nervous, like we don't have any backup at all, like no live bait, no shrimp, nothing. Like no, we're gonna learn how to catch fish with lures, and he did. He caught his
Yeah, he
very first.
outfished us. Yeah, he
Yeah, he
outfished
caught his
us
very
that first
first.
time.
Yeah, nice redfish with a lure, little one of our jerk chads, I believe it
And a
was.
snook and a trout. He caught a slam right in our
Yeah.
face.
Yeah,
You
and that
know,
was his first time doing that. And all of a sudden, he's just like, "Oh, it is possible." So that would be my recommendation: is don't go out there with lures as kind of like your maybe plan. It needs to be the plan, and that is the only way you're going to get good. And when you do, you're going to have like this newfound freedom. You're going to have more control. You're going to be able to explore new areas, more areas, cover more water, and ultimately, in my opinion, have a whole lot more fun. I mean, it makes everything so much easier when you don't have to think about bait, about keeping bait alive, about taking a net, about taking, even if you're wade fishing, right? I mean, Luke, you used to do that. Remember, we always had those little those old school yellow and white
oh yeah.
little bait buckets that we trail around. Like all that stuff is just extra crap that you don't have to lug around.
Yeah, after college, I moved over to Melbourne, worked at a company called Harris Corporation. First job, I was super pumped, but I'd never fished those waters. And I was, we were very fortunate. Like our dad had a flats boat, so we like he let us use it whenever we wanted. But when I was over there, now I don't have access to the flats boat. And so yeah, when I started, I would go wade Sebastian Inlet. There's a little area that I found. There's a trail going back in the mangroves to fish some of the backwaters. It's a pretty long trail, and I'd be walking down that trail at night, like before sunrise, with the headlamp on. I've got my 10-foot cast net and the bait bucket in one hand, my rods in the other, and a backpack with all my gear. And so I would catch bait, and then I would hide the net in the mangroves, and then fish, 4 or 5 hours, how long I was fishing, and then have to come back, pick up the net, get it all in, and go back through that trail. It was terrible. And now again after but it was good and bad. So that was moving there is what finally saved me and got me out of the rut, where I bought a kayak, and now I didn't have room for a cast net. Like I just got a little small kayak that I can easily take in and out. And I just went with one lure. And so I decided, okay, I'm good with bass on this. At that point I was using the Super Fluke Junior. And so hey, I can get strikes with bass with this lure. I know reds and snook and trout eat the same thing. And so I literally just would take that lure only, no cast nets. And yes, I was just, it wasn't like immediate where I was catching fish immediately. I at least wasn't getting skunked, but I wasn't crushing it. But over time, the fact that I was able to cover all this water and explore and get to learn that new area that I've never been to before. I mean, after a few months, I was now starting to consistently catch slams, which I really struggle with live bait, because now I was able to cover a ton of the Indian River in a short period of time, and now I knew all the kind of the little honey holes, if you will, like the different oyster bars that likely held fish, or any kind of trough near a mangrove. I knew it because I've been there, and it was a huge advantage to go just actually explore the water and spend 100% of my time actually fishing, and zero of it messing with either catching live bait, maintaining it, or cleaning it up afterwards. It was just so much easier.
So knowing what you know now, if you were going to focus on one, maybe two lures, right? Because I do think there are times when you might want something that could maybe get a little bit deeper. If you happen to be fishing in a scenario with a deeper dock, or even near a channel or a pass inlet, what would you take knowing what you know now? If you could only fish with one or
I,
two.
I would focus on one and master it first. And that would just be a paddle tail, like around a 3.5, 4 inch paddle tail. This is the Mulligan, the 4 inch Mulligan. This is my favorite overall. Works all season.
Slam Shady
Yeah,
color.
cast a mile. Cool thing is it can be rigged on jig heads, right? For deeper water, can be rigged on jig head just fine. Also, it can be rigged on weighted hooks. I don't have a bare weighted hook, but here's like the type of weighted hook that works well on paddle tails and shrimp lures. So number one would be the paddle tail. After getting good with that, right? This is great for covering water, for exploring. This is the exploration lure. You can cover, it's super easy. This tail does all the dirty work. Just cast, retrieve is all you need to do. Every once in a while, pause it, speed it up, slow it down. Sometimes the fish like it faster, sometimes like it slower, sometimes they only hit on the pause, sometimes you have to twitch it. I literally will change tempos throughout the cast and let the fish tell you what they're hitting on. Get this first. Number one, this thing is just all, even went to Texas, right? Same, this one color, Slam Shady. Don't worry about any other color. Just get Slam Shady. It flat out works. And just get comfortable with it. And most importantly, explore the water. Get used to seeing the signs of life. Get used to identifying mullet. Get used to looking for egrets. Get used to seeing where the fish are holding. Like when you're moving around and you're spooking fish, that's fine, right? At least you found them. Now take note of exactly where they were. Typically they're going to be in a pothole or positioned like near a fallen tree, just some sort of unique structure on the edge of the oysters. And then make sure to target those spots going forward before you spook the fish. And it's shocking again how just that simple. I just wish somebody would have kind of hit me upside the head with that years ago.
Yeah.
Would have saved a lot of frustration. And so number two lure, once you get the paddle tail, right, then a little shrimp lure is tough to beat. For fishing tight to structure, like skipping under mangroves or skipping under docks where you want it to be in a certain strike zone for as long as possible while getting strikes, this thing is the best I've ever used. I've caught we've only had it for what is it, 2.5 years or whatever. And most of it almost has a record for every species. I've caught my biggest snook with it. I've caught my biggest redfish with it, as far as, snook and reds on lures. Biggest triple tail, biggest cobia, right? Like I don't have sea trout isn't there yet, but the shrimp lure, like a good shrimp lure like this is extremely effective. And that's really it. Like literally most of my time I'm using these two lures. The only a third one would be this tweaker. This is the new one that I've really been enjoying. But these two
What color was that one?
Oh, don't you worry about that, Joe. It's a prototype,
Mm-hmm.
but it's good. It's becoming one of my favorites. But
Like Turd Ferguson.
yeah, it is a Turd Ferguson.
Funny name.
But yeah, less is more. And that was another thing I learned. I came from the bass world where I would have like my favorite lure, I'd have like 10 colors of it, right? And I thought I knew when one color was better than the other. It turns out I didn't. I was just guessing at it. And now with saltwater, especially with Salt Strong, like part of my job is to go test stuff. And I've done a lot of lure tests where I'll do, I'll have the same lure, same rod, same line, everything. And I'll have one rod with 3 casts, put it down, pick up the other rod, same everything except for the lure color, 3 casts, and I'll literally do that for 2 or 3 hour span. And not once yet has one color caught fish while the other one didn't. So what I eventually realized is, hey, I don't need to be lugging around all these colors. I don't need to waste time changing them. Let's just focus on finding the fish, and I'm going to catch more fish. And so now, like my tackle bag went from like I had the big old giant planos with multiple trays to now I have just a little soft pack and with a couple like 2 little trays, and it's half full. And I'm catching way more fish than I ever had before because it's just simplified it, and I'm not wasting time doing anything other than finding the fish.
The one thing I would add to it, especially if you're used to live bait that has scent and you believe that scent helps, because it does. Obviously, a fish is honed in on the smell of other fish, is to use the Dr. Juice Saltwater Slam scent. I truly believe in it. We've seen it work even on some of the footage you have, like from that dock where you're essentially cane pulling the prawn and the fish weren't hitting. As soon as you put that Dr. Juice Saltwater Slam on there, it was like something happened. It triggered, and that was seconds later. It wasn't like the next day. And all of a sudden, those fish were just fired up on it. There's something magical in that juice. I wish I knew what was in it, but I do believe that works. I personally use it, personally pay for it myself, and I use it every single time. I want every advantage I can get when I'm using lures.
Yeah, it helps. It's not as important as what we thought that cat food was, right? When we realized we
Sure.
didn't have it and we go to the store to get it. So it's nice when I don't have it, it's not a must have. The must have is just get like a couple lures that you trust and find the fish. And then the tweaks, like the scent obviously helps. Going lighter on line is a big deal as well, especially if you're in high populated areas. Like we have a fishing school for all Insider Club members. and it goes through, beginner, intermediate, and advanced modules, just to make sure that we don't overcomplicate things. But on the advanced module, you'll see this more advanced leader assembly where there's multiple knots, with the idea of it is just minimizing the diameter of the line for every inch possible, right? And that way those bigger, smarter fish that are used to sensing danger, they have a much tougher time realizing that something's not quite right, and they're going to hit the lure when otherwise they wouldn't. My overslot redfish count has skyrocketed, and big trout over 20 inches has skyrocketed once I simply just changed my line setup. And I did it with one rod just to test it out. I was seeing results, so I would take some of my newer to fishing. I would give them that rod while I'll use the other setup where the that normal leader is the full span. And whoever was using that rod caught the biggest fish almost every time. Like it was eye opening. Way more of an impact than I ever thought.
It's
So,
amazing. Yeah.
so yeah, like all these little details help, but the biggest thing is just please, I just wish somebody told me this is leave the cast net at home for at least 5 trips, right? Pick a number and force yourself to just not do live bait at all. Force yourself to move, get comfortable with identifying those high probability spots. And again, the fishing school has modules on finding the fish where you can use software to find, quickly find oyster bars. You can quickly find the depth changes, and ideally look for areas that have, multiple, it depends on the season, of course, but areas that have multiple forms of structure along with some unique depths. And once you kind of get used to looking at that, you kind of can't really unsee it anymore. Like you can start looking at maps and within 5 minutes pick out 10 spots based on the conditions. Or that was another issue too. We would just have our 6 spots, and we would go to those 6 spots every single time,
Yeah.
no matter if it was summer or spring or fall. And we were surprised that we weren't consistent. And the fact that it was a fish move, right? Fish move based on conditions, and we never really put that into our game plan, if you will. So yeah, it's fish aren't smart, but they're not stupid. All they're doing is reacting, and as long as you can understand how they react to changing environments, then it becomes pretty easy to predict where they're going to be.
Yep. I like that challenge, by the way, like the 5 trips, like go 5 trips, no live bait, just lures, and
2
watch what
lures,
happens.
and those 2 lures I said, and yeah, if you do it, so biggest thing is depth control. So this one lure can be rigged great on a jig head, right? Deeper water, more than 3 feet, boom, you already know what you're going to throw. Less than 3 feet, throw it on the weighted hook, right? Same lure, just on the weighted hook, and that's it. Like if you just do that, 2 rods, deep setup, lighter, shallower setup, and that's it. That's literally it.
Yep. I like it. And if you want more help with it, Luke mentioned the fishing school. That's for insider members. And then the next level for redfish in particular, because that Luke mentioned earlier, that was probably one of the tougher ones to really dial in and be consistent with. We have a redfish mastery course. I think it's our top selling course of all time that we've sold. Been around a long time. It just got updated. So we went out recently and filmed a bunch of new videos. That thing has hundreds, maybe thousands of questions because it's interactive as well, which is really cool. So you get to ask questions, the coach, Luke, and get answers. And sometimes there's stuff that, hey man, we'll go film a whole new video on that. So we filmed, I don't know how many new videos.
About half dozen, and then a couple more on the radar that we're going to add to it, just based
Yeah.
on questions that have been coming in.
Yep.
Yeah, because redfish, it was the one that I struggled with the most. I was most intimidated by, and now after just knowing again how they react, they're the most predictable of all. So now, like when tournament fishing, like going after the slam, especially tournament fishing, where I want to get the biggest snook, trout, and redfish is last. I focus on the trout and the snook during the twilights when those they're just tougher to catch, especially the big ones. And then redfish, okay, as soon as I have the trout and snook down, now let me focus on redfish because they'll kind of be easy to catch throughout the day. So yeah, this course goes through it all as far as finding the spots, not just finding spots, the good spots based on the conditions, based on the season as well. So we go through every different season, what factors are more or less important. And again, as you'll see, it becomes easy.
Yeah, and it does get easy when you know the formula. It's really four parts. We focus first and foremost on where to find them, right? And then the when. So by each season, even by tide, and time of day. So we got the where, the when, and then the what to use. Luke mentioned some lures. There are some other times where you might want to use a top water or a skinny lipper. I think in general, only start out with one or two. Best advice ever. But as you get better and as you get more advanced, there are some things that you want to put in your arsenal. The Polk County Tweaker, some sort of little jerk shot off the bottom, no brainer. And then how is the last one, like how to use those different lures in those different situations, right? Because depth is a really really big one. You could put someone in the absolute best spot, but if they have the wrong lure rigged on the wrong jig head and the fish are down here and they're fishing here, they're not going to catch anything. We've seen it. We've done it many times before, and so it's really those four things. When you combine them all and know each one for each season, it's like all of a sudden everything clicks, and that's what the Redfish Mastery does. So if you want to look at that and buy it, it's in saltshore.com, and just go to the courses tab and you'll see that Redfish Mastery. It's like I believe it's a red box currently, and I think we're updating some of the course stuff. But anyhow, it's Redfish Mastery, fantastic course. And if you already own it, make sure to go check it here soon, because it's getting some new updates here in the next couple weeks. So if you don't see it right away, know that those videos will start updating here very, very soon.
Yeah, and it's specifically targeted to catching redfish with lures.
Yes.
Zero dimensional live bait. This is for those who are just struggling with lures, and after you go through it, you will not struggle with lures anymore. On top of what Joe mentioned, there's also lessons on just the rods and reels and line as well to use. A lot of people have, finding the fish is always number one. But even when finding the fish, a lot of people just don't have good results because they're just not using equipment that's good. And good doesn't mean that you're going out spending $300 on a combo. It's just knowing what type of rod to use, what size reel and what size line, and even the best knots, right? We have everything. If you could have never fished saltwater before, we have lesson on tides, understanding tides and currents. A lot of people struggle with that. So we have lessons on all that stuff. And then as questions come in, we add to it. And if you have any questions, anytime you're going through it, on the bottom of every lesson is a Q&A. So it's interactive, and you post your questions there. It'll actually come straight to me. I get notified every time a question comes through, and I answer it. I really enjoy chatting with everybody in there. And again, a passion of mine is helping people have more fun on the water with friends and family. And this course will absolutely help you do that, because it's just so much nicer to not have to lug the cast net around and go through all the extra hassle just to catch some redfish. As you'll see, they're very predictable, where you can find them easy. There's a handful of lures that work throughout the season. Just make some small little tweaks, and they'll work for whether it's winter or summer or anything in between. And you can consistently catch them without having to load around a bunch of gear like I used to. Like my back still is mad at me about, apparently.
Ooh, cool. Well, yeah, go check that out. And for you current members, if you have any questions, let us know. There's a place to comment down here where else if you watch this on the tube or on the blog, etc. So appreciate you guys. And if there's anything we can do to help you or better serve you, let us know. Otherwise, we'll talk to you on the next episode. Peace. We out.
Yeah.